The blood on the Mustang's flank was still wet when Lila first saw him standing in the canyon, his body trembling with pain and fear. And she knew in that instant she would not leave until he was whole again. It was late spring in 1883, and the Arizona Territory stretched wild and unforgiving in every direction from her father's ranch. Lila Hartwell had ridden out before dawn to check the water sources in the eastern pastures, a task she had taken on since her father's leg injury had left him unable to make the longer rides. At 22 years old, she had grown up in this harsh landscape, learning its moods and dangers the way other women learned embroidery and piano. Her mother had died when she was 12, leaving her to become both daughter and partner in running the cattle operation that barely kept them solvent. The Mustang was magnificent even in his wounded state. His coat was the color of desert sand at sunset, and his eyes held the kind of wildness that spoke of mountain ranges and freedom. A deep gash ran along his left shoulder, likely from barbed wire or perhaps a predator's claws. He snorted when he saw her backing further into the narrow canyon, but his movements were labored and unsteady. Lila dismounted slowly, keeping her own horse, Penny, at a safe distance. She spoke in low, soothing tones, the kind of voice she had used on countless frightened animals over the years. "Easy now, beautiful. I am not here to hurt you. Let me see what happened to you." The Mustang's ears flicked forward and back, processing her words and tone. She took a step closer, then another. It took nearly an hour of patient waiting and gentle coaxing before she was close enough to see the full extent of his injuries. The gash was deep but clean, and she suspected it was fresh, perhaps from that very morning. Without treatment, infection would set in within days. She returned to Penny and retrieved the medical supplies she always carried, then spent another hour earning enough trust to clean the wound with whiskey and apply a poultice of herbs her mother had taught her to make. The Mustang flinched but did not bolt, as if some part of him understood she was offering help rather than harm. What Lila did not know was that she was being watched. Cole Brennan had been tracking the wild herd for 3 days, not to capture them, but to study their movements for the ranch where he worked as foreman. The Double Bar M needed to know where the Mustangs watered so they could avoid conflicts over resources during the dry summer months. He had been crouched behind a formation of red rocks when he saw the woman approach the injured stallion, and something in his chest had tightened at the sight. He was 26 years old and had spent the last 8 years drifting from ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to put down roots. The son of a failed homesteader who had drunk himself to death in a Kansas boarding house, Cole had learned early that depending on anyone led only to disappointment. He kept his relationships simple, his friendships surface level, and his heart carefully guarded behind walls built from years of self-reliance. But watching this woman work with the Mustang, seeing the infinite patience in her movements and the gentle determination in the set of her shoulders, something shifted inside him. She was not trying to break the animal's spirit or force compliance through fear. She was offering partnership, respect, and healing. Her dark hair was braided down her back, and even from this distance he could see the focus in her face, the way she seemed entirely present in the moment. When she finally mounted her horse and rode away, Cole remained hidden. He told himself it was because he did not want to startle the Mustang, but the truth was more complicated. Something about the scene he had witnessed felt sacred, private, and he was not ready to intrude upon it or examine too closely why it had affected him so deeply. Over the next 2 weeks, Lila returned to the canyon every morning. She brought food and water for the Mustang, changed his dressings, and gradually expanded the circle of trust between them. She named him Cimarron, after the wild rivers of the territory, and she talked to him as she worked, telling him about her life, her dreams, and her worries about keeping the ranch afloat. "My father wants me to marry Thomas Whitley," she confided one morning as she applied fresh salve to the healing wound. "He owns the feed store in town and has been asking for 2 years now. Father says it would be a practical match, that Thomas could help with the ranch finances, but Thomas looks at me the way men look at property they are considering purchasing. He never asks what I think or what I want. He just assumes I will eventually say yes because what other options does a rancher's daughter have?" Cimarron nickered softly, and Lila smiled. You understand, do not you? You know what it means to have others try to decide your fate? But you chose freedom instead. Cole heard this conversation from his usual spot behind the rocks. He had returned every morning telling himself he needed to monitor the Mustang herd's movements, but knowing he came to see her. He learned her name by following her at a discreet distance one afternoon and hearing the mercantile owner greet her. Lila. It suited her. Soft but strong. He knew he should make his presence known, but each day he hesitated. What would he say? That he had been watching her for weeks. That would make him sound like a predator rather than a potential friend. And what business did a drifter with no prospects have speaking to a woman like her anyway? She owned land, had responsibilities, a life. He had nothing but a horse, a saddle, and wages he sent back to his younger sister in Kansas to pay for her schooling. On the 15th morning, everything changed. Lila arrived to find Samarin standing at the canyon entrance rather than hiding in its depths. His wound had healed well, showing pink new skin beneath the scabbing, and his eyes were bright and alert. When she approached, he did not back away. Instead, he stretched his neck forward and allowed her to stroke his muzzle. You are ready to go back to your family, are not you? She whispered, feeling the bittersweet ache of success mixed with loss. That is good. That is what I wanted for you. She removed the halter she had slowly acclimated him to wearing, freeing him completely. Cimarron tossed his head, then did something unexpected. He stepped forward and pressed his forehead gently against her chest, a gesture of trust and gratitude that brought tears to her eyes. Go on now, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Be free and be safe. The Mustang wheeled and galloped away, his movements fluid and powerful, disappearing into the maze of canyons and mesas that stretched toward the horizon. Lila stood watching until he was just a speck in the distance, then sat down on a boulder and allowed herself to cry. They were not tears of sadness exactly, but rather the release of 2 weeks of intense focus and emotional investment. That was when Cole finally stepped out from behind the rocks. Lila jumped to her feet, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she kept on her saddle. Who are you? How long have you been there? Long enough, Cole said, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow. I did not mean to startle you. My name is Cole Brennan. I work for the Double Bar M. You have been spying on me? Lila's fear was shifting to anger, color rising in her cheeks. Not spying, Cole said, though he knew that was not entirely true. I was tracking the Mustang herd for my boss. I saw you working with the injured stallion, and I just kept coming back. I am sorry. I should have introduced myself sooner. Lila studied him with sharp, assessing eyes. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes were worn but clean, and his gun belt sat easy on his hips in the way of a man who knew how to use his weapons but did not lead with violence. There was something in his face that was hard to read, a guardedness that matched her own. Why did you keep coming back? She asked finally. Cole met her gaze and decided to offer her the truth, or at least part of it. Because I have never seen anyone work with an animal the way you did. Most people would have tried to rope him and force him into a corral. You gave him a choice. You earned his trust instead of taking his freedom. I guess I wanted to see if you would really succeed. And now that you have seen it? He smiled then, a slow, genuine expression that transformed his face. Now I am wondering if you would allow me to buy you lunch in town, as an apology for my poor manners in not introducing myself sooner. Lila knew she should say no. She did not know this man, and his explanation, while plausible, still had edges that did not quite fit together smoothly. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at her, a kind of wonder mixed with respect, that made her curious. I need to get back to my father's ranch, she said, but I will be in town on Saturday for supplies. If you happen to be at the hotel restaurant at noon, I suppose we could share a meal. Cole's smile widened. I will be there. Saturday arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures that promised a scorching afternoon. Lila wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that her father's housekeeper had helped her press that morning. She told herself she was not nervous, that this was just a meal with a stranger who had shown interest in her work with animals, but her hands trembled slightly as she tied the ribbons of her bonnet. The town of Copper Springs was small but bustling, serving ranchers and miners from 50 miles in every direction. The hotel restaurant was the nicest establishment, with real tablecloths and a menu that changed weekly. Lila arrived exactly at noon to find Cole already waiting, cleaned up and wearing a pressed shirt she suspected he had purchased just for the occasion. They sat by the window, and the first few minutes were awkward, filled with comments about the weather and the quality of the food. But then Cole asked about Samorin, and Lila's reserve began to thaw as she described the process of earning the Mustang's trust. "The key is patience," she explained, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "Animals know when you are trying to dominate them versus when you are trying to communicate. My mother taught me that. She had a gift with horses that people came from 3 counties to witness." "She must have been remarkable," Cole said. "She was." Lila's expression grew distant. "She died of pneumonia 10 years ago. One day she was healthy, and 3 days later she was gone. My father never really recovered from losing her. Oh, he functions and runs the ranch, but something in him closed off after she died." Cole nodded slowly. "My mother left when I was 8. Just walked away one morning and never came back. My father told everyone she died, but I saw her 5 years later in Dodge City with a new husband and a baby. She looked right through me like I was a stranger." The confession surprised them both. Cole rarely spoke about his past, and he had not intended to share something so personal. But Lila's openness had somehow pulled it from him. "That must have been terrible," Lila said softly, reaching across the table to briefly touch his hand. "I am sorry." The touch was fleeting but electric. Cole felt it travel up his arm and settle somewhere in the region of his heart. When she pulled her hand back, he wanted to reach for it again but restrained himself. They talked through lunch and into the afternoon, losing track of time as they discovered shared views on everything from ranching practices to literature. Lila had educated herself through her mother's book collection, and Cole had learned to read from the cook at a cattle outfit in Texas who had insisted that ignorance was a choice, not a fate. "I should get back," Lila finally said with reluctance as the shadows grew long outside the window. "My father will worry." "May I see you again?" Cole asked, as "I would like that." They began meeting regularly after that, always in town where propriety could be observed. Cole courted her with a combination of old-fashioned formality and genuine interest that Lila found intoxicating. He asked her opinions, listened to her ideas about improving ranch operations, and never once suggested she should be content with a smaller, quieter life. After their third meeting, Lila invited Cole to dinner at her father's ranch. James Hartwell was a gruff man in his late 50s, weathered by hard work and loss, and he regarded Cole with suspicion. "What are your intentions toward my daughter?" he asked bluntly over dessert. "Father," Lila protested, mortified. But Cole met the older man's gaze steadily. "Honorable one, sir, I care for Lila very much. I know I do not have much to offer right now except hard work and determination, but I am saving money, and I have prospects." "Prospects?" James repeated skeptically. "Thomas Whitley has an established business and a house in town." "Thomas Whitley also has the personality of a fence post," Lila interjected, "and I have told you repeatedly I will not marry him." The dinner ended tensely, but as Cole prepared to leave, James pulled him aside. "My daughter has a mind of her own, always has. If she has decided she likes you, then I suppose I should get to know you better. But if you hurt her, prospects or not, I will make you regret it." "Understood, sir. And for what it is worth, hurting her is the last thing I would ever do." As summer deepened into July, Cole and Lila's relationship grew more serious. He took her riding in the mountains, and she showed him hidden valleys where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship beneath the growing attraction between them. One evening, they sat by a creek as the sun set in brilliant orange and pink. Cole had been quiet all day, and Lila finally asked what was troubling him. I need to tell you something about myself, he said, his voice tight with anxiety. Something I should have mentioned before now. Lila felt her stomach clench. All right. I have a sister in Kansas, Sarah. She is 16 years old, and I am her guardian. Our father drank himself to death when she was 6, and I have been supporting her ever since. She is smart, Lila, smarter than I ever was, and she has a chance at a real education. There is a teacher's college that has accepted her for next year, but it is expensive, and I need to keep working to pay for it. Why would you think that would bother me? Lila asked, confused. Because it means I cannot just think about myself or my future. Every decision I make has to factor in Sarah's needs. If we were to marry, you would be taking on that responsibility too. Lila was quiet for a moment, and Cole's heart sank. But then she smiled. Cole Brennan, the fact that you have been caring for your sister all these years just makes me admire you more. Family is not a burden. It is a blessing. And if Sarah is half as good a person as her brother, I would be honored to know her. The relief that flooded through Cole was overwhelming. He pulled Lila close and kissed her for the first time, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I love you, Cole said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I know it is too soon, and I should wait, but I love you, Lila. I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you with that Mustang. It is not too soon, Lila whispered, her eyes shining. I love you too. I've been trying not to say it, trying to be sensible, but I love you. They sat by the creek until the stars came out, making plans and promises, building dreams together that felt both fragile and incredibly strong. But not everyone was happy about their relationship. Thomas Whitley had been courting Lila in his own methodical way for 2 years. He had assumed her refusals were merely feminine modesty, that eventually she would see the logic of accepting his proposal. When he learned she was seeing the foreman from the Double Bar M, he was furious. He went to James Hartwell directly. That drifter has no business courting your daughter. He has no property, no real prospects. I can offer Lila security and standing in the community. James sighed. Thomas, I appreciate your interest, but Lila has made her choice clear. She does not want to marry you. She does not know what she wants, Thomas insisted. She is being dazzled by a pretty face and cowboy charm. When he moves on to the next ranch, she will be left with nothing. Cole is not like that. How do you know? What do you really know about him? The seed of doubt once planted was hard to ignore. James began asking questions around town, learning about Cole's habit of moving from job to job, never staying in one place for more than a year or two. When he confronted Cole about it, the younger man was honest. I have moved around a lot, sir, that is true. But it was because I was trying to find the right place, somewhere I could see building a future. I think I have found that here. Or maybe you will get restless again in 6 months and leave my daughter heartbroken. I will not, Cole said firmly. I know my history does not inspire confidence, but people can change. I have changed. Lila has changed me. Despite his words, James remained skeptical, and his coolness toward Cole created tension in the household. Lila found herself caught between the two men she loved most, trying to bridge a gap that seemed to widen every day. The situation came to a head in late August. Cole had been working extra hours to save money for a ring, and Lila had been helping her father with the books, trying to find ways to make the ranch more profitable. One evening, she discovered a series of loans her father had taken out over the past 3 years, loans she had not known about. Father, we owe almost $3,000, she said, her voice shaking. The payment is due in October. Where are we going to get that kind of money? James looked old and defeated. I have been trying to figure that out. I took the loans to buy new breeding stock, thinking it would increase our herd value, but the market has been depressed and I cannot sell the cattle for what I need. Why did you not tell me? Because I am your father. I am supposed to protect you, provide for you. Instead, I am losing the land your mother loved. Lila's mind raced. What if we sold the eastern pastures, the ones near the canyon where I found Cimarron? I have had them surveyed. They might bring in 1,500, maybe 2,000 if I'm lucky. It is not enough. That night, Lila told Cole about the situation. He listened carefully, then asked to see the ranch's books. For the next week, he spent every free moment analyzing the finances, looking for solutions. Finally, he came to Lila with a proposal. The Double Bar M is looking to expand. What if they leased your eastern pastures for their breeding program? It would bring in steady income without selling the land. And I talked to my boss about some other ideas, ways to improve water access and reduce costs. It is not a perfect solution, but combined with selling some of your older stock and negotiating a payment plan with the bank, I think we can save the ranch. James was skeptical at first, but as Cole walked him through the numbers, his resistance faded. The plan was solid, built on practical ideas rather than wishful thinking. More than that, it showed a level of commitment and care that could not be faked. You did this for Lila, James said finally. I did it for both of you, Cole corrected. This land is part of who Lila is. I could not stand by and watch her lose it. Over the next month, they implemented Cole's plan. The Double Bar M agreed to a generous lease. The bank accepted a restructured payment schedule, and a cattle broker from California paid premium prices for the ranch's older breeding stock. By late September, the crisis had been averted. One evening, as they celebrated with a quiet dinner, James raised his glass to Cole. I owe you an apology. I thought you were just a drifter looking for an easy situation. I was wrong. You are a man who stands by his commitments. I would be honored to have you as a son-in-law if that is what you both want. Cole looked at Lila, his heart in his eyes. Is that what you want? More than anything, Lila said. He got down on one knee right there in her father's dining room, pulling out a simple gold band he had bought with his saved wages. Lila Hartwell, will you marry me? I cannot promise you wealth or an easy life, but I can promise you loyalty, partnership, and love that will last until my final breath. Yes, Lila said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, absolutely, yes. They married in October, in a small ceremony at the church in Copper Springs. Sarah traveled from Kansas for the wedding, and Lila loved her immediately. The girl was bright and funny, with her brother's determination and a curiosity that reminded Lila of herself at that age. Thank you for making him happy, Sarah whispered, as they embraced after the ceremony. He has been alone for so long taking care of me. He deserves this. We are going to take care of each other, Lila replied. That is what family does. Cole and Lila moved into the foreman's cabin on the Hartwell Ranch, a small but comfortable building that Lila transformed into a warm home. Cole continued working for the Double Bar M while also helping James with the increasingly profitable Hartwell operation. The lease payments and improved management had stabilized the finances, and within a year the ranch was thriving. Their first child, a son they named Michael James, was born in the autumn of 1884. Cole wept when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the weight of love and responsibility. Lila watched her husband with their baby and felt her heart might burst from happiness. I never knew I could feel this much, Cole admitted late one night as they watched Michael sleep. I spent so many years keeping everyone at a distance, telling myself I did not need anyone. But I was just afraid of losing people, afraid of not being enough. You are more than enough, Lila assured him. You are everything. Sarah finished her schooling and became a teacher, eventually taking a position in Copper Springs so she could be near her brother and his growing family. She married a kind rancher named David Fletcher when she was 20, and their wedding was a joyous affair that brought together all the people who had become family through choice rather than blood. A daughter, Emma Rose, was born in 1886, followed by another son, Thomas William, in 1888. The cabin became too small for their growing family, so Cole and James worked together to build a larger house on a piece of the Hartwell land that overlooked the canyon where Lila had saved Cimarron. Lila never forgot the Mustang, and sometimes in the early mornings she would see wild horses running in the distance and wonder if one of them was him, if he was still out there living free. Cole would stand beside her on those mornings, his arm around her waist, and they would watch the horses together in comfortable silence. As the years passed, the Hartwell Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the territory. Cole's management skills and Lila's gift with horses created a breeding program that was sought after throughout the Southwest. They raised their children with the same values of hard work, respect for the land, and kindness toward others that they both believed in. James Hartwell lived to see his grandchildren grow, finally finding peace and happiness again after years of grief. He died quietly in his sleep in 1895, content in the knowledge that the land he and his wife had built would continue through his daughter and her family. Thomas Whitley eventually married a widow from Phoenix and moved away from Copper Springs, and Lila felt only relief when she heard the news. She never regretted her choice, never wondered what her life might have been with someone else. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Lila back to the canyon where it had all begun. They rode out at dawn, just as she had that morning when she found Cimarron. The desert was painted in shades of gold and rose, and the air was cool and sweet. "Do you remember the first time I spoke to you?" Cole asked as they stood at the canyon's edge. "I remember thinking you were either very brave or very foolish to admit you had been watching me," Lila teased. "Probably both." He pulled her close. "But I could not stay hidden anymore. I watched you healing that Mustang, and I knew you were the one. I did not believe in fate or destiny, but I knew in that moment that my life had just changed forever." "Mine too," Lila said. "I just did not realize it yet. I thought I was just saving a horse. I did not know I was finding my future." They stood together as the sun climbed higher, casting light across the landscape they both loved. In the distance, a herd of Mustangs appeared, moving across the desert like flowing water. Lila caught her breath, and Cole smiled, understanding without words what she was feeling. One horse separated from the herd, a stallion with a coat the color of desert sand at sunset. He stopped on a ridge and looked back toward where they stood. Even from that distance, Lila could see the scar on his left shoulder, healed but visible. "It is him," she whispered. "It is Cimarron." The Mustang tossed his head as if in acknowledgement, then wheeled and galloped back to his herd, powerful and free. Lila watched until they disappeared into the maze of canyons, then turned to her husband with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me. For understanding, for giving me this life." Cole kissed her softly. "Thank you for saving that Mustang. Thank you for being patient and kind and stubborn enough to heal something wild and broken. You did not just save him. You saved me, too." They rode back to their ranch hand in hand, their horses moving in easy synchronization. Smoke rose from the chimney of their home, where their children would be waking up and starting their day. Sarah and David would likely bring their 2 kids over for Sunday dinner. James's grave would need fresh flowers from the garden Lila tended with such care. Life stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and joys, hardships and celebrations, but they would face it together, partners in every sense of the word, building on the foundation they had created through trust, respect, and love. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, their children playing in the yard and the desert spreading wild and beautiful in every direction, Lila leaned against Cole's shoulder and sighed with contentment. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. "I'm thinking that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Me too," Cole said, kissing the top of her head. "Me too." The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons and the milestones that mark a well-lived life. Michael grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did, though he showed particular talent for working with the wild Mustangs that still roamed the territory. Emma inherited her mother's gift with horses and her father's head for business, keeping detailed records of bloodlines and breeding results that would have impressed any university professor. Thomas, the youngest, was quieter than his siblings, but had an artist's eye, documenting life on the ranch through sketches and paintings that captured the essence of the desert they all called home. Cole taught his sons everything he knew about ranching, horsemanship, and the importance of integrity. He taught his daughter that gender was no barrier to competence and that she should never accept limitations others tried to place on her simply because she was female. Lila taught all three children to see the world through compassionate eyes, to respect the wild things that shared their land, and to understand that true strength came from gentleness rather than force. In 1896, when Arizona was still a territory waiting for statehood, a young man arrived at the Hartwell Ranch looking for work. His name was Jack Morrison, and he was running from a troubled past in Oklahoma. Cole saw something of himself and the desperate hope in the young man's eyes, and despite having a full crew, he hired Jack on. Lila watched her husband mentor Jack the way he had once needed mentoring, teaching him not just about cattle and horses, but about building a life worth living. She fell in love with Cole all over again, seeing the man he had become, so different from the guarded drifter who had hidden behind rocks to watch her tend a wounded animal. One night, after Jack had been with them for 6 months and was showing real promise, Lila asked Cole why he had taken a chance on someone with such an uncertain history. "Because someone took a chance on me," Cole said simply. "Your father could have forbidden you from seeing me. You could have chosen the safe option with Thomas Whitley. Instead, you both believed I could be more than my past. How could I not offer Jack the same opportunity?" Jack stayed with them for 3 years, learning and growing, before moving on to start his own small ranch in New Mexico, but he never forgot the kindness shown to him, and he returned often to visit, always bringing his wife and eventually his children to meet the people who had changed his life. Sarah's children, Cole's niece and nephew, were frequent visitors to the Hartwell Ranch. They grew up alongside Michael, Emma, and Thomas, creating a tight-knit extended family that supported and challenged each other. Summer gatherings at the ranch became legendary in Copper Springs, with families coming from miles around to enjoy Lila's cooking, Cole's storytelling, and the music that inevitably broke out when someone brought a fiddle or guitar. Through it all, Cole and Lila remained partners in the truest sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through losses, and celebrated victories as a team. They argued occasionally because they were both strong-willed people with firm opinions, but they never went to bed angry and always found their way back to common ground. In 1899, when Michael was 15, he asked his parents if he could try to gentle a young Mustang stallion he had been watching. The horse was smaller than Cimarron had been, with a dark bay coat and intelligent eyes. Lila recognized the pleading hope in her son's face and remembered feeling the same way about the wounded stallion so many years before. "Yes," she said, ignoring Cole's worried look. "But you do it the right way, with patience and respect." Michael's face lit up. "Will you teach me?" Over the next months, Lila passed on everything she knew about working with wild horses. She showed Michael how to read body language, how to offer partnership rather than demand submission, how to earn trust through consistency and gentleness. Cole watched them work together and saw the legacy his wife was creating, a legacy of compassion and skill that would outlast them both. The day Michael finally rode the gentled Mustang through the ranch yard, sitting easy in the saddle while the horse moved with fluid confidence, Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. He caught Lila's eye and saw his own pride reflected there. "We did good," he said later that night as they prepared for bed. "We are still doing good," Lila corrected. "We are not finished yet." She was right. The new century brought changes to the Arizona territory, with more settlers arriving and the old Wild West slowly giving way to civilization. But the Hartwell Ranch remained a constant, adapting without losing its essential character. In 1903, tragedy struck when a late spring blizzard caught several ranches unprepared. The Hartwell operation lost 30 head of cattle, and their neighbors fared even worse. Cole organized a cooperative effort to help the smaller ranchers rebuild, extending credit and sharing resources in a way that solidified the family's reputation for integrity and community leadership. That same year, Emma fell in love with a young veterinarian named Daniel Cooper, who had opened a practice in Copper Springs. Daniel was educated, progressive in his thinking, and completely captivated by Emma's combination of beauty and competence. Cole and Lila approved of the match, recognizing in Daniel the same qualities they valued in each other. The wedding in 1904 was a grand affair, with guests coming from 3 territories to celebrate. As Cole walked Emma down the aisle, Lila remembered her own wedding day and marveled at how much had changed while the essential things remained the same. Love, family, commitment, these were the constants that gave life meaning. Michael married in 1906, choosing a spirited young woman named Rebecca Sanchez, whose family ran sheep rather than cattle. The marriage caused some raised eyebrows in a community where old prejudices about sheep operations still lingered, but Cole and Lila welcomed Rebecca with open arms, seeing in her the same independence and strength that characterized their own relationship. Thomas, true to his artistic nature, moved to Santa Fe in 1907 to study at an art colony that was attracting attention throughout the Southwest. Cole struggled with his youngest son's decision to leave ranching, but Lila reminded him that they had raised their children to follow their own paths, not simply replicate their parents' choices. "He will find his way back," she assured Cole. "The land is in his blood, even if he expresses his connection through art rather than cattle." She was right. Thomas returned 2 years later with a wife, Clara, a fellow artist, and together they built a studio on the eastern edge of the ranch property. Thomas's paintings of ranch life and desert landscapes began selling in galleries throughout the West, bringing a new kind of recognition to the Hartwell name. As the years advanced, Cole and Lila gradually stepped back from the daily management of the ranch, trusting Michael and Rebecca to take over operations. They remained involved and consulted, but they also allowed themselves the luxury of time together, taking rides into the desert just for pleasure rather than work, sitting on their porch in the evenings and watching the grandchildren play. In 1912, Arizona achieved statehood, and the celebration in Copper Springs lasted for 3 days. Cole and Lila attended the festivities, now in their 50s, but still vital and engaged with their community. Younger people pointed them out to their children, telling stories of how the Brennans had helped build the territory into something worthy of statehood. "Do you ever think about how different your life might have been if you had not found Cimarron that morning?" Cole asked one evening as they rode out to the canyon that still held such significance for them both. Lila considered the question seriously. "Sometimes, but I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not in the same way, but somehow." "You believe in fate, then?" "I believe in choices," Lila said. "I chose to help that Mustang. You chose to reveal yourself instead of staying hidden. My father chose to give you a chance. We made 1,000 choices that led us here, and I would make every single one again." Cole reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of decades of practice. "I love you, Lila Brennan. I have loved you since the moment I saw you offering healing instead of capture. I will love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible." "They are possible," Lila said firmly. "My mother used to say that real love does not end, it just changes form. I feel her with me still, in the wind and the land and the horses. When we are gone, we will be here too, in the lives we have touched and the family we have built." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the desert in the colors they both loved. In the distance, they could see the lights of their ranch, small beacons of warmth in the vast landscape. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys now, as their children and grandchildren made their own homes on the land. Michael and Rebecca had given them 3 grandchildren so far, with another on the way. Emma and Daniel had 2 children, both showing their mother's talent with animals. Thomas and Clara had no children yet, but they had transformed their part of the ranch into a small artist's retreat, bringing new life and perspectives to the family operation. Sarah and David's children were grown now, with families of their own, but they remained close, visiting regularly and maintaining the bonds that had been forged through years of shared meals and celebrations. In 1915, Cole suffered a heart episode that frightened them both. For several days, as he recovered under the care of their son-in-law Daniel, Lila refused to leave his side. She held his hand and told him stories, reminding him of all the reasons he had to keep fighting, to stay with her. "I am not ready to let you go," she whispered one night when she thought he was sleeping. "We still have too much living to do." Cole squeezed her hand, his eyes opening to meet hers. Then I will stay. For as long as I can, I will stay. He recovered, though Daniel warned them both to take things easier. Cole grudgingly accepted his limitations, and Lila adjusted their routine to accommodate his reduced stamina. But their love remained constant, perhaps even deepening as they faced the reality of mortality together. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary in 1915 with a party that brought together everyone they loved. Michael gave a toast that had half the guests crying, speaking of his parents' love as a foundation that had made everything else possible. Emma read a poem she had written about her mother's gift with horses and her father's quiet strength. Thomas unveiled a painting he had created, showing a young woman tending to a wounded Mustang while a cowboy watched from the shadows, the moment that had started it all. To love, Sarah said, raising her glass, the kind that heals, transforms, and lasts. To love, everyone echoed. That night, as they lay in bed in the house they had built together, Cole held Lila close. 30 years en récit, he marveled. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. It is just the beginning, Lila said sleepily, and we have at least 30 more ahead of us. But even as she said it, she knew it was not quite true. They were both aging, and the hard life of ranching had taken its toll. What they had was precious, finite, and all the more valuable for that impermanence. The years between 1915 and 1920 were good ones. Cole's health stabilized, and he found new purpose in teaching his grandchildren the skills and values he had learned over a lifetime. Lila continued working with horses, though now it was mostly her grandchildren's ponies rather than wild Mustangs. They took joy in small things, morning coffee on the porch, the laughter of children playing, the sight of sunset over land they had helped preserve and improve. In the spring of 1921, as Lila was preparing the garden for planting, she saw a herd of Mustangs moving across the far pasture. They stopped to drink at the creek, and among them was a large stallion with a coat the color of desert sand. He was older now, his muzzle showing gray, but she would have known him anywhere. She called for Cole, and together they stood watching as Cimarron led his family across their land. The stallion paused at the fence line, looking back toward the house as he had done all these years ago. Then he tossed his head and continued on, still wild, still free. He remembers, Cole said softly. Yes, Lila agreed. He remembers. It was the last time they saw him, and somehow they both knew it. That night they made love with the tenderness and passion of people who knew how precious every moment together was. Afterward, as Lila lay with her head on Cole's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she felt utterly content. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For loving me, for choosing me, for building this life with me. Cole kissed her forehead. You saved me, Lila, just like you saved that Mustang. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building. Everything good in my life comes from you. We saved each other, Lila corrected. That is what love does. The seasons continued their ancient cycle, and Cole and Lila continued with them, partners until the very end. When Cole finally passed away peacefully in his sleep in the autumn of 1925, at the age of 68, Lila grieved deeply, but without regret. They had been given 42 years together, and they had made the most of every single one. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who made sure she was never alone. She continued to work with horses until just weeks before her own death, teaching great-grandchildren the same lessons she had learned from her mother and perfected through experience. On a cool morning in March 1930, Lila Brennan died peacefully in her sleep, her hand resting on a photograph of Cole taken on their wedding day. She was 70 years old, and she had lived a life full of purpose, passion, and love. They buried her next to Cole on the hillside overlooking the canyon where it had all begun. The funeral brought together 4 generations of family and friends whose lives had been touched by the couple's kindness and integrity. Michael spoke of his parents' legacy, not just the ranch they had built, but the values they had lived and passed on. They taught us that love is not passive, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. It is active, daily, consistent. It is choosing each other every morning and keeping that promise through hardship and joy. They taught us to be gentle with the wild things, to offer healing instead of hurt, partnership instead of domination. Everything we are as a family comes from their example. As the mourners departed, a herd of wild Mustangs appeared on the ridge above the canyon. Among them was a young stallion with a coat the color of desert sand at sunset, bearing the unmistakable bloodline of Cimarron. He stood watching the gathering below for a long moment, then wheeled and raced across the desert, powerful and free, living proof that some legacies transcend death. The Hartwell Ranch continued for generations, always run by descendants of Cole and Lila who understood that the land was not something to exploit but something to steward. The breeding program they had started became renowned throughout the Southwest, known for producing horses that combined strength with gentleness, spirit with trainability. And sometimes in the early morning light, ranch hands reported seeing a woman in an old-fashioned blue dress walking toward the canyon, accompanied by a tall man in cowboy clothes. They would stand together watching the Mustangs run, then fade away as the sun climbed higher. The hands never mentioned these sightings to anyone except each other, understanding that some things were too sacred to speak of casually. The story of how Cole and Lila met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story about compassion, patience, and the healing power of love. It was a story about choosing partnership over dominance, about seeing and honoring the wild spirit in others rather than trying to break it. Most of all, it was a story about two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that lasted far beyond their own lives. In the ranch house that overlooked the canyon, Emma's great-granddaughter hung Thomas's painting in a place of honor, where everyone could see the moment that had changed everything. The young woman tending the wounded Mustang, unaware she was being watched. The cowboy in the shadows, knowing he had just found his future. The desert stretching wild and beautiful in every direction, holding possibilities neither of them could yet imagine. And somewhere beyond the visible world, in whatever place souls go when their earthly work is done, Cole and Lila Brennan rode together through endless desert under infinite sky, their hands joined and their hearts finally, completely at peace.